Welcome to the Open Service Mesh Community Meeting of January 11th, 2022, which never stops being a weird year to say aloud. And we have just a few things to chat about today. First of all, the release candidate for 1.0.0 RC3 is now available. So if you're interested in testing that out, you have a very short amount of time left before that is actually released, but you can jump in and try the RC if you happen to see this in time. Otherwise, you will hopefully have some fresh bits on disk to learn from and report bugs about. Yeah, that's the only announcement I've got. And for discussion items, we have Keith Maddox here who wants to talk a little bit about traffic target. So I know that we're coming back from holidays and people in the middle of the release right this minute. So we might have people having to watch the recording, but Keith, you want to give us the quick rundown of what's going on with your proposal?
Absolutely, yes. So this is a similar proposal to, or the same proposal of what I mentioned in the service mesh interface group, but to re-summarize here. Essentially, there are some incompatibilities and limitations of the current traffic target spec within SMI that, in OSM being a consumer SMI, this affects the OSM community, as well as every other implementing mesh. The short version is that the current state of the SMI spec it fails to be future-proof when it comes to multi-cluster. And there are also incompatibilities between SMI spec and other, several meshes that are currently out there as far as implementations. So we're looking to make some changes to the SMI spec, or specifically traffic target. And we want the OSM community to have input on what we eventually come up with. So I've linked in the meeting notes, I've linked the doc that contains a living document. It's where our proposal will live. If you look in that document, there is a section where we discuss, we'll be discussing incompatibilities between SMI, and part of that discussion is a kind of state of the world, a state of, how do other meshes utilize their analogous policies around authorization. There's sections for Istio, Link, or DConsole, OSM, Nginx currently, but if you're another mesh, traffic, AWS app mesh, anybody who wants to add a section on their mesh implementations, that there's a section for you to do so. And want the OSM community to be a part of that as well, as there's a section there. So if you want to discuss, feel free to come to the SMI meetings. They're actually on the opposite Wednesdays from this meeting. And we'll be able to discuss there or add comments in the document, whichever. Also, or feel free to hop into the SMI channel and the CNCF Slack to discuss more. So this will be an ongoing topic. I just wanted to put that out there today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention, Keith. And I have a question. I'm looking at the document and I see that we're starting now to get different meshes to fill this in. I'm wondering if you have a specific date that you're targeting, no pun intended, or like a scope that you want covered. Basically, how will people, what's our definition of done? Like if somebody comes in to fill the one out for OSM and they see a few things for the other ones, how will they know if that's enough to add? And also how will they know when to do it by? Yeah, those are the two questions, I guess.
Yeah, those are some great questions. So as far as scoping, just due to the, one, getting the year started back up and the fact that a lot of our meetings are every other week, I'd say I'd like to try to get that part filled out by the end of February. That feels like a reasonable time box. You have a couple of meetings to get that announced and done. I guess for this meeting, what's the proper date in February? Like the 22nd? So let's say the end of that week. So February, 25th, as kind of the scope and time box. As far as like
Nice.
acceptance criteria, like what is our definition of done? The main goal is to have about a paragraph or so of the authorization strategy for that particular mesh with, if possible, example configuration. Maybe it's an example of the CRD being used, or a couple of CRDs being used, or links to an example, or just would be fantastic, because as I mentioned earlier, we'll be hoping to use this document to start brainstorming and spark discussion on a general specification that fits. So does that answer adequately what you were looking for, Bridget?
Yeah, that gives us like the acceptance criteria and target date. I think end of February is good. It's realistic. For acceptance criteria, I think I want to make sure that, and Jackie has joined us from the OSM team. Thank you for joining, Jackie. I want to make sure that people understand what the request is, like understand what you're asking for. You're asking for an explanation of how traffic target is currently implemented in the mesh. Is that what you're looking for?
Or if not traffic target specifically, an explanation of the service authorization scheme for that mesh. So even if say if CO doesn't currently support traffic target, they have an analogous authorization resource called authorization policy. An explanation, and I'll be filling this part in, an explanation of how authorization policy works for console. It's called something different. For linker D, it's called something different. But an explanation of how those resources work with links or inline, whichever, just with example configuration would be the kind of acceptance criteria for done for those meshes. Thanks for the clarification. That's a useful clarification to make.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I'm really glad to have, you coming to talk about what SMI needs from the OSM community at our call. I really appreciate that. I wonder if Jackie, I know you're just joining us, and but I know you've also worked on some of this. Do you have any questions for Keith about what he's looking for, or any clarifications that would help you understand it?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in so late, but I saw your message and wanted to be a part of the call. So no, I feel like I missed a little bit of context in the beginning, but I don't want you to have to backtrack for me.
The TLDR is, hey, it looks like traffic target needs some work. We have a proposal doc that Keith has started. And the first step, of course, is for us to understand how each mesh is doing traffic target or traffic target adjacent things, so that we can make sure that any changes made to the spec will work with everyone's meshes. And I dropped the link is in the community doc notes, but I did just drop it in the chat of this Zoom as well.
I'm not sure, like, how do those conversations happen with the other service meshes? I guess I was never a part of those SMI calls.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if we have any representation now that Michelle is gone on those calls. I guess maybe is there an OSM team member that's stepped up to fill that role?
Yeah, so we occasionally have some team members who are available for those calls. Johnson or Delian sometimes is able to make it. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty important to make sure that, because Keith, you were saying that OSM is doing the most implementation of traffic target currently, or I'm not sure if I understood the context of why you were saying it matters what OSM thinks.
Yes, so based on one, just my understanding from the outside end of OSM, as well as the meshery service mesh compliance matrix, it seems that OSM is pretty in step with the current kind of SMI definitions. There may be I assume there may be some implementation details or a superset of functionality of the SMI spec. But like when I look at OSM documentation, I see like traffic target, I see traffic split, like I see some of those same resources being used for OSM. And when discussing it, this came to my mind, when discussing other changes to the SMI controller SDK or the SMI SDK, Phil Gibson mentioned a hard dependency in the Go modules of OSM on the SMI spec. and we're talking about changing that to be the SMI controller SDK. And that's where, that's the main reason actually, why I wanted to make sure OSM was aware of these changes to traffic target. Because if there's, a dependency in at the Go modules level, then I think that's something the OSM community probably wants to be a part of for sure in the beginning of the conversations.
Yeah, that's appreciated. Jackie, does that give you more context to kind of see why we're talking about this?
Yes, it does. Thanks. Yeah, I think I know there's a shift in our team, and maybe we could figure out, who can be point for this and be consistently point for those communications. I think, establishing consistency there would be really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important. And I really appreciate you coming and making a point to make sure we understand this, Keith, just because it would obviously be bad for OSM if our compliance on the matrix suddenly looked like low instead of excellent. If we get a good grade until no.
It's fine. To be fair, there's not a lot of compliance in the matrix at the moment, but that's in SMI community. That's what we're trying to do. And I actually ran into these incompatibilities with traffic target while trying to build the Istio controller and get Istio some representation, some compliance on the matrix. So yeah, this is an important thing. I definitely want us to be a part of conversations moving forward.
Yeah, and to kind of set context too, this ends up being really valuable for people who are making anything that interacts with meshes, because the vendors out there in the space who are making something that interacts with meshes don't necessarily want to try to make something interact with n different meshes. If they could just make something interact with the compliant spec, then it's much easier for them to make their product. So
that's a really good call out. And it just reminded me that we might want to get representation from the Flux and Argo rollouts community for this as well, because Argo rollouts, I know specifically, has SMI support, or their documentation that says they have SMI support. So I will try to drop a line. See if I can. I've worked with that community a couple of times before. I might try to let them know about changes coming to the spec. That might not have to be such a preemptive conversation, since really the target for the SMI spec are the meshes. But I think that there should definitely be some communication to those communities so they can update their tools to be based on the spec.
yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, should I put down that as an action item that Keith will do what necessary outreach there might be to those communities, or do we have needs to reach out to other people?
Yeah, I can do that for the necessary communities to make sure they're aware of these changes.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Jackie, do you have any other topics or questions or things you want to bring up?
I guess I just want to clarify what the asks are from the OSM team here. Just want to clarify what our action item should be going away from this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main action item slash ask is on the design document. There's a heading for OSM. If a representative from the OSM community could just give a paragraph, 4 or 5 sentences, something like that, on how OSM implements traffic target with just links or GitHub links to example configuration. For that would be greatly appreciated, because that'll help us springboard discussion on a more general specification across all meshes.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, fantastic. Do we have any other topics? Okay.
Not from me. I don't think so.
Okay, fantastic. It looks like our next meeting will be February 8th. And for anyone who's interested in this and also interested in SMI, take a look at the SMI community call. There is a one-off happening next week to do a bug bash, and then every other week after that. So
is that next week or tomorrow?
Oh, is that tomorrow? That probably is tomorrow. Everything is terrible and terrifying. I can't believe it's already January 11th.
It is. That is.
Time.
Yeah, my calendar showed it as tomorrow.
You are correct. It is tomorrow. We have a bug bash tomorrow, and then we will have the community call next week. So for SMI. And then OSM again, we will have this call again, February 8th, 2022, which is a real date that exists in the world. I know, right? All right. Thank you all. All right. Take care.